A wild leopard mom begged a man to save her cub, and then the man did the impossible. What started as a chance encounter in the desert turned into a fight for survival that no one could have predicted. One moment, he was just a quiet traveler on a lonely road. The next, he was standing face to face with a desperate predator, risking his life to pull her cub from certain death. But that impossible rescue was only the beginning, because hidden in the shadows was a force far more dangerous than the wild itself, a power determined to erase every trace of these animals and destroy anyone who stood in the way. As secrets unravel and danger closes in, one question burns. Can an ordinary man protect a fragile life against unstoppable power, or will courage cost him everything? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The sun hung low over the New Mexico desert, painting the canyon walls in deep shades of orange and red. Nathaniel Briggs adjusted his worn baseball cap and squinted through the dusty windshield of his old service truck. Another day of fixing broken-down equipment on remote farms was drawing to a close. The dashboard clock read 6:15 in the evening, its dim green numbers barely visible in the fading light. Nathaniel's calloused hands gripped the steering wheel as his truck bounced along the unpaved road. 20 years of working as a field mechanic had etched permanent oil stains into his skin and tired lines around his eyes. People rarely noticed him, and when they did, they saw what they expected to see. Just another drifter making ends meet in the vast emptiness of the Southwest. The canyon walls rose steep and imposing on either side of the road. Nathaniel knew this route well. It was the quickest way back to his small rental house on the outskirts of town. The familiar sound of loose tools rattling in the back of his truck provided a steady rhythm to his journey. Then he heard it. The sound cut through. The engine noise, a cry unlike anything he'd heard before. Nathaniel slowed the truck, his weathered face creasing with concern. The cry came again, desperate and pleading, echoing off the canyon walls. He pulled over, killing the engine. The evening silence rushed in, broken only by that strange, haunting sound. It pulled at something deep inside him, something that wouldn't let him simply drive away. Nathaniel grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the truck. The dry desert air carried the scent of sage and dust. His boots crunched on loose gravel as he moved toward the sound. It grew louder as he approached a dry riverbed that cut through the canyon floor. In the dimming light, movement caught his eye. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. There, pacing back and forth along the riverbed's edge, was a leopard. Her spotted coat gleamed in the last rays of sunlight, muscles rippling with each anxious step. She let out another cry, that same desperate sound that had stopped him on the road. Common sense told him to retreat. Wild leopards weren't supposed to be in New Mexico, and getting closer to one was certainly not wise. But something in the big cat's behavior held him transfixed. Her movements weren't threatening. They were frantic, almost pleading. She paced in tight circles, looking alternately at him and at something near the dry riverbed's edge. "What's got you so worked up?" Nathaniel murmured, more to himself than the leopard. He took a careful step forward, then another. The leopard watched him but didn't move to attack. Instead, she let out another of those haunting cries. Following her gaze, Nathaniel noticed a large concrete irrigation pipe emerging from the riverbank. Years of erosion had exposed its mouth, and recent rains had caused part of it to collapse. As he drew closer, keeping one eye on the mother leopard, he heard another sound, a weak mewing coming from inside the pipe. His flashlight beam cut through the growing darkness, illuminating the scene. Through the partially collapsed opening, he could make out a small, spotted form. A leopard cub, no bigger than a house cat, was trapped inside the pipe. The collapse had created a narrow gap, too small for the mother to reach through, but just large enough to see her trapped baby. The mother leopard's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't hunting or threatening, she was asking for help. Her cries weren't those of a predator, but of a desperate parent trying to save her child. Nathaniel stood very still, processing the situation. The practical part of his brain told him this wasn't his problem. He fixed machines, not wildlife situations. He should call someone, game wardens, animal control, somebody with training for this sort of thing. But as he watched the mother's distressed pacing and heard the weakening cries of the cub, he knew there wasn't time for that. Out here, cell service was spotty at best, and by the time help arrived, it might be too late. The mother leopard stopped her pacing and looked directly at him. In the growing darkness, her eyes reflected his flashlight beam, giving them an almost supernatural glow. There was intelligence in that gaze, and something more, a desperate trust that Nathaniel had never experienced before. He let out a long breath and set his flashlight down, angling it to illuminate the pipe's opening. "Okay," he said softly, more to steady himself than anything else. "Okay, let's see what we can do here." The leopard watched as he knelt by the pipe, her eyes never leaving him. Nathaniel could feel the weight of her gaze as he assessed the situation. The cub's weak mewing continued, each sound tugging at his heart. This wasn't just another repair job. This was a life hanging in the balance. And somehow, improbably, he was the only one who could help as Nathaniel knelt by the pipe. His hands trembled slightly. The mother leopard's presence loomed behind him, her breath close enough that he could almost feel it on his neck. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get back to his truck where it was safe. But the weak cries from inside the pipe kept him rooted in place. "Easy now," he whispered, though whether to the leopard or himself, he wasn't sure. "Just let me help." He reached for the pipe's collapsed opening, testing the edges. Years of working with machinery had taught him to assess problems before acting. The concrete had crumbled in places, creating a mess of sharp edges and unstable sections. One wrong move could cause more collapse, potentially crushing the cub. The mother leopard growled softly, circling closer. Nathaniel's heart hammered in his chest as he felt her presence just feet away. He forced himself to focus on the task, not the deadly predator watching his every move. "I need my tools," he said quietly, standing slowly. The leopard tensed, but didn't attack. Moving with deliberate care, Nathaniel backed toward his truck. Each step felt like an eternity, his back exposed to those powerful jaws. At the truck, he grabbed his toolbox with shaking hands. The familiar weight of it provided some comfort. This was what he knew, fixing things, solving problems. Even if the stakes had never been quite this high before. Returning to the pipe, he laid out his tools. The leopard mother had drawn even closer, her muscled form clearly visible in his flashlight's beam. Her eyes never left him, glowing with an intensity that made his mouth go dry. "All right," he muttered, selecting a crowbar. "Let's do this." Working as quickly as he dared, Nathaniel wedged the crowbar into a crack where the pipe had begun to separate. The concrete groaned as he applied pressure. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cool evening air. The mother leopard paced faster, her agitation growing with each passing moment. The pipe shifted slightly, and a shower of dirt and small rocks cascaded down. The cub's cries grew more frantic. Nathaniel's arms burned with effort as he leveraged the crowbar, trying to widen the gap without causing a complete collapse. Suddenly, the concrete gave way with a sharp crack. Nathaniel lost his balance, stumbling backward. The mother leopard snarled, and he felt the rush of air as she lunged past him, stopping just short of the pipe. His heart nearly stopped, but she wasn't attacking. She was trying to reach her cub through the newly widened opening, but it still wasn't enough. The cub remained trapped, its cries growing weaker. The mother turned to Nathaniel, and in her eyes he saw something that shook him to his core: desperation, pleading, and a wild trust he couldn't explain. Taking a deep breath, Nathaniel grabbed his sledgehammer. It was risky. One wrong hit could bring the whole thing down. But time was running out. He positioned himself carefully, trying to find the sweet spot that would break the concrete without harming the cub. "Please let this work," he whispered, and swung. The impact sent shockwaves up his arms. Once, twice, 3 times he struck. The concrete began to crack, pieces falling away. The mother leopard's cries joined her cubs, creating an eerie chorus that echoed through the canyon. With one final swing, the opening crumbled. Nathaniel dropped the sledgehammer and dove forward, reaching into the pipe. His fingers brushed fur, then found purchase. The cub was so small, so fragile in his hands as he carefully pulled it free. He had just enough time to set it down before the mother leopard was there. But instead of the mauling he expected, she simply gathered her cub gently in her mouth. She paused for just a moment, meeting Nathaniel's eyes one last time. In that gaze, he felt something pass between them, a connection he couldn't explain, an understanding that transcended the natural order of things. Then she was gone, melting into the deepening shadows of the canyon with her cub, leaving Nathaniel alone with his racing heart and trembling hands. He sat back heavily on the ground, adrenaline draining away to leave him weak and shaking. The weight of what he'd just done, the sheer impossibility of it, crashed over him. He'd faced down a wild leopard, risked his life for her cub, and somehow survived. More than that, he'd been part of something profound, something that defied explanation. The canyon was silent now, the desperate cries replaced by the soft whisper of the evening wind. But Nathaniel knew he would never forget those sounds, or the trust in that mother's eyes. Something had changed in him, shifted fundamentally. He had crossed some invisible threshold, and there would be no going back. The morning sun beat down on Nathaniel's truck as he drove into town, his mind still replaying the events of the previous night. His hands bore small cuts and bruises from wrestling with the concrete pipe, the only physical proof that it hadn't all been some strange dream. He pulled into Jimmy's diner, needing coffee and a moment to sort through his thoughts. The bell jingled as he pushed open the door, and the familiar smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around him. A few regulars sat scattered at the counter, their voices raised in animated discussion. "Hafford's gonna do whatever he wants anyway," one of them was saying. "Man's got more money than God and twice the attitude." Nathaniel slid onto a stool, ordering his usual black coffee from Rita, the weathered waitress who'd worked there as long as anyone could remember. "What's all this about Hafford?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Rita rolled her eyes as she poured his coffee. "Preston Hafford's pushing through some big water project, saying it'll bring jobs, but mostly it's just gonna redirect water from the canyon to his new developments. The canyon, the same place where he'd found the leopards." Nathaniel's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "Whole thing's a mess," the man next to him chimed in. "Irrigation pipes breaking down, animals dying of thirst. But Hafford's got the board in his pocket." Nathaniel's mind flashed to the collapsed pipe, the desperate mother leopard. It couldn't be a coincidence. The diner's bell jingled again, and a woman walked in. She stood out immediately, not just because she was a stranger, but because of the intensity radiating from her. Light brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, clothes suited for fieldwork, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She approached the counter, pulling out a stack of papers. "I'm Dr. Celeste Warner," she announced. "I'm conducting a survey about the ecological impact of the proposed water diversion project." The regulars suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating. Rita busied herself with the coffee pot. The woman's shoulders tensed, but she pressed on. "The project will have devastating effects on local wildlife. We've already seen..." "Listen, lady," One of the men cut in. "We've all heard this before. Hafford's gonna do what Hafford's gonna do." Nathaniel watched as frustration flickered across her face. Before he could stop himself, he spoke up. "I saw something last night. In the canyon." Dr. Warner's sharp eyes fixed on him. "What did you see?" He hesitated. It sounded crazy, even in his head. "A leopard. With a cub." The diner went quiet. Dr. Warner stepped closer, her expression intense. "Where exactly?" "Near one of the old irrigation pipes. The cub was trapped inside." He paused, then added quietly, "I got it out." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he was lying or delusional. "You're telling me you encountered 2 leopards, one of them trapped, and you just helped?" Nathaniel shrugged, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "The mother, she was desperate. I couldn't just leave them." "Do you have any idea how significant this is?" Dr. Warner's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "Those leopards shouldn't even be here, unless—" her eyes widened with realization. "The drought's driving them out of their usual territory. And, with the water being diverted," she pulled out a chair next to him. "I'm going to need you to tell me everything, every detail." For the next hour, Nathaniel described what had happened. Dr. Warner listened intently, occasionally making notes. When he finished, she sat back, running a hand through her hair. "This could be exactly what we need," she said. "Proof that Hafford's project is already affecting endangered species." But she fixed him with a penetrating look. "Are you willing to go on record? Hafford doesn't take kindly to opposition." Nathaniel thought about the leopard's eyes, the trust she'd shown him. He thought about the pipe, deliberately weakened to justify Hafford's project. Something settled. In his chest, a quiet certainty. "Yes," he said, "I'll help." Dr. Warner, Celeste, smiled for the first time, transforming her serious face. "Good, because I think we're going to need each other." She pulled out a business card. "Meet me at this address tomorrow morning. We have work to do." As she left the diner, Nathaniel looked down at the card in his hand. He'd spent his life keeping his head down, staying out of trouble. But those leopards had trusted him. Maybe. It was time he trusted himself. Rita appeared with a coffee pot. "You sure about this, Nathaniel? Hafford's not someone you want as an enemy." Nathaniel thought about the desperate mother leopard, about all the other animals suffering in silence. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "you don't get to choose your battles. Sometimes they choose you." Celeste spread a map across her office desk, her finger tracing the winding lines of the canyon. "Hafford's been doing this for years. He finds pristine areas, claims they're underutilized, and turns them into golf courses or luxury homes." Nathaniel studied the map, noting how the water routes had been marked in blue pen. The office around them was cluttered but organized, with filing cabinets labeled by year and region, and walls covered in wildlife photos. "Last year, it was the wetlands near Socorro," Celeste continued, pulling out a thick folder. "Before that, the Mesa grasslands. Every time, endangered species mysteriously relocate just before his projects begin." Her voice carried years of frustration. "But we've never been able to prove anything. And now he wants the canyon," Nathaniel said quietly. "Exactly." Celeste pulled out several photographs. "These were taken 6 months ago. See how the water levels have dropped? Far more than drought alone would cause." Nathaniel picked up one of the photos, remembering the desperate thirst in the leopard cub's eyes. "You think he's deliberately draining it?" "I think it's worse than that." Celeste leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I think he's actively trying to drive the wildlife out or kill them off, but I need proof." Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably. He was used to fixing machines, not fighting wealthy developers. "Look, what I saw was terrible, but you're not an activist," Celeste finished. "I understand. Just come with me to the canyon. One look, Your mechanical knowledge might spot something I've missed." Nathaniel thought about walking away, returning to his simple life. But the memory of the leopard mother's trust nagged at him. He nodded. An hour later, they were hiking through the canyon. The sun beat down mercilessly, but Celeste moved with purpose, pointing out signs of disruption. Dried up water holes, damaged vegetation, peculiar pipe arrangements. "Hold on," Nathaniel said, kneeling beside a junction box. "This isn't right." His fingers traced the connections, finding subtle but deliberate damage. "These valves have been tampered with. See these scratch marks? Someone's been gradually closing off the water flow. Celeste crouched beside him, taking photos. How long would something like this take? Months, maybe? Slow enough that it would look natural. He stood, wiping sweat from his forehead. "There's more. Those broken pipes I found the cub in, they didn't collapse from age. The support structures were cut. They continued deeper into the canyon. Nathaniel's expertise revealing more signs of sabotage, modified pressure gauges, redirected drainage, subtle but systematic destruction of the water system. Near a dried-up pond, Celeste stopped abruptly. "Wait." She pulled on latex gloves and carefully collected water samples from a stagnant pool. "Look at this residue. This isn't natural. Poison? We'll need to test it, but yes, I think so. Just enough to make the animals sick, drive them away." Her hand shook slightly as she sealed the samples. He's not just redirecting water. He's actively making the habitat uninhabitable. Nathaniel remembered the leopard mother's desperate cries. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just start construction? Because if endangered species are present, he needs environmental impact studies, public hearings, permits. Celeste's voice was bitter. But if the animals conveniently disappear first, no paperwork needed. Nathaniel finished. They found more evidence as they worked their way through the canyon. Subtly vandalized water sources, traces of contamination, systematic destruction disguised as natural decay. Each discovery confirmed their suspicions. This was a calculated campaign to eliminate the leopard population. "Your mechanical knowledge," Celeste said, as they documented another tampered valve. "It's exactly what we needed. I would have missed half of these signs." Nathaniel nodded, feeling an unfamiliar sense of purpose. His practical skills, usually dismissed as simple handyman work, were helping uncover something important. "The leopards," he said, "they're not just passing through, are they? This is their home." "One of the last breeding pairs in the region," Celeste confirmed. "If we lose them," she left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. They spent the rest of the afternoon gathering evidence, photos, samples, detailed notes of the sabotage. Each discovery built a clearer picture of Hafford's hidden agenda, a systematic plan to eliminate any obstacles to his development, regardless of the cost to wildlife. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the canyon, Celeste carefully packed away their samples. "This is more than I ever hoped to find," she said. "With your testimony about the leopards and this evidence of tampering," she looked at Nathaniel, "we might actually have a chance to stop him." The desert sunset painted the sky in deep purples and oranges as Nathaniel steered his truck along the winding canyon road. Beside him, Celeste reviewed their evidence on her tablet, the blue glow illuminating her focused expression. "These water samples alone should be enough to trigger an investigation," she said, scrolling through photos. "The contamination levels are far beyond what could occur naturally." Nathaniel nodded, keeping his eyes on the darkening road. The headlights carved a path through the growing darkness, revealing the sharp drop-offs along the canyon's edge. "What happens when we present all this?" "First, we submit it to the Environmental Protection Agency. Then, Celeste's words cut off as bright lights suddenly flooded their rearview mirror. A black SUV roared up behind them, its high beams blinding. Nathaniel squinted, adjusting his mirrors. "Hold on," he said, gripping the wheel tighter. The SUV rammed them from behind. The impact jolted them forward, sending Celeste's tablet flying. "What are they doing?" she gasped, bracing herself against the dashboard. Nathaniel pressed the accelerator, but the truck's engine whined in protest. The SUV struck again, harder. Metal crunched. The steering wheel jerked in Nathaniel's hands. "It's Hafford's men," Celeste said, her voice tight with fear. "They must have been watching us." Another hit sent them fishtailing toward the guardrail. Nathaniel fought for control, his years of experience handling vehicles on rough terrain now desperately needed. The truck's tires squealed as he corrected their slide. The SUV pulled alongside them. In the dim light, Nathaniel caught glimpses of dark figures inside. The larger vehicle began forcing them toward the canyon's edge. "Nathaniel!" Celeste cried out as their right wheels left the pavement. He yanked the wheel left, but the SUV slammed into them again. The guardrail gave way with a horrific screech of metal. For a moment, they seemed to hang in space. Then they were falling. The world turned upside down as the truck rolled down the steep ravine. Glass shattered. Metal twisted. Nathaniel's head struck something hard. Through the chaos, he reached for Celeste, trying to shield her as they tumbled. The truck finally came to rest on its side, the engine hissing in the darkness. Pain lanced through Nathaniel's body. "Celeste?" he called out, tasting blood. A weak groan answered him. "I'm here." Above them, headlights swept across the canyon wall as the SUV drove away. Nathaniel hung awkwardly in his seatbelt, aware of sharp pains in his ribs and shoulder. "Can you move?" "Yes," Celeste said, though her voice was strained. "My legs trapped, but I think I can get free." They worked slowly in the darkness, helping each other out of the wreckage. Celeste's face was cut, and she limped heavily. Nathaniel's whole body screamed in protest as he helped her away from the truck. They collapsed together on the rocky ground, breathing hard. The night air was cold, and the canyon walls loomed above them like silent witnesses. "They tried to kill us," Celeste whispered, shock evident in her voice. Nathaniel pulled her closer as she began to shiver. "This isn't just about the Leopards anymore," he said. "Hafford's willing to murder to keep his secret." "The evidence," Celeste suddenly remembered. "The tablet, the samples were in my toolbox," Nathaniel finished. "It's still in the truck. Bad. If it survived the crash." He stood painfully and made his way back to the wreck. The toolbox had been thrown clear but remained intact. Inside, the water samples were unbroken, and the tablet, though cracked, still powered on. "It's all here," he said, returning to Celeste. "Everything we found." She took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "You saved us," she said. "If you hadn't been able to control the truck for as long as you did." Nathaniel looked at their joined hands, feeling something shift inside him. His simple skills, driving mechanics, practical knowledge of these back roads, had kept them alive. For the first time, he saw his abilities not as ordinary, but as vital. "We need to get somewhere safe," he said, helping Celeste to her feet. "Do you trust me?" She met his eyes in the darkness. "With my life," she answered without hesitation. "I already have." They began the slow, painful climb up the ravine, supporting each other. Each step was a struggle, but they moved with shared determination. The evidence they carried could stop Hafford, but only if they survived to use it. Nathaniel felt Celeste lean against him as they walked, and he realized how quickly their partnership had deepened into something more. They had crossed a line. Tonight, from investigators into targets, from colleagues into protectors of each other, the stars wheeled overhead as they made their way through the desert night. Injured but alive, their bond forged stronger by survival. The fight had become personal, and Nathaniel knew there was no turning back. Nathaniel's truck groaned as he navigated the rough terrain back to the collapsed irrigation pipe. His body still ached from the crash, bruises darkening across his ribs and shoulder. But he had to know the truth. Dawn painted the canyon walls in shades of amber as he parked near the site where he'd rescued the leopard cub. The place looked different in daylight, less mysterious but somehow more sinister. Evidence that had been hidden in darkness now lay exposed under the morning sun. He grabbed his toolbox and approached the broken pipe. His mechanical mind clicked into gear, analyzing the damage with fresh eyes. The collapse hadn't looked natural that night, but fear and urgency had prevented a closer inspection. "Show me what really happened here," he muttered, crouching beside the twisted metal. The pipe's edges weren't just broken, they were cut. Clean marks scored the metal at precise angles. Nathaniel ran his fingers along the cuts, feeling the sharp precision. This was done with power tools, not natural wear and tear. He dug deeper into the disturbed earth around the pipe. More evidence emerged. Fresh tool marks in the soil, boot prints that hadn't yet weathered away. Someone had worked here recently, deliberately weakening the structure. "They wanted it to fail," he said aloud, pieces clicking into place. "But they wanted it to look accidental." Rising, Nathaniel followed the pipe's path along the canyon floor. Every few yards, he found more signs of tampering. Small holes drilled to create weak points. Support structures subtly compromised. All carefully calculated to cause a gradual, seemingly natural collapse. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The trapped cub hadn't been an accident. It was part of Hafford's plan. The developer had orchestrated the pipe's failure to eliminate evidence of the leopard's presence in the canyon. A dead cub would have proven nothing. But a missing one, presumed killed by infrastructure failure? That would have suited his purposes perfectly. Nathaniel's hands clenched into fists. His simple act of compassion that night had unknowingly disrupted a calculated scheme. By saving the cub, he preserved proof that the leopards existed here. Proof that Hafford desperately needed to destroy. The weight of this knowledge settled heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't just some passerby who'd helped an animal in distress. He'd become an accidental obstacle to a ruthless plan, and now Hafford knew it. Nathaniel took photos of the evidence with his phone, documenting every cut, every drill mark. His hand shook slightly, but his focus remained steady. The skills he'd developed over years of mechanical work, attention to detail, understanding of how things break, were now weapons. In this fight, he found more than just a sabotage pipe. Hidden behind brush, he discovered empty containers of industrial chemicals. Water testing strips he'd borrowed from Celeste confirmed his fears. The same compounds they'd found in the poison pools upstream. They're not just driving the leopards out, he realized. They're making sure nothing survives to prove they were ever here. The scope of Hafford's plan became clear. The developer wasn't just building on the land. He was systematically erasing its history, its ecosystem, its protected species. And he was willing to kill to keep it secret. Nathaniel gathered the evidence carefully, securing samples in his toolbox. The same toolbox that had helped him save the cub now held proof of the plot behind its near death. The irony wasn't lost on him. Standing in the morning light, Nathaniel felt something shift inside him. He'd spent his life avoiding conflict, staying beneath notice. But that night with the leopards had changed everything. His choice to help had unknowingly placed him at the center of something much bigger. The fear was still there. Fear of Hafford's power, fear of what might happen to him and Celeste. But alongside it grew something stronger, determination. He understood now that stepping back wasn't an option. He was already part of this fight, had been since the moment he heard those desperate Cries in the darkness. His phone buzzed. A message from Celeste asking about his findings. Nathaniel looked at the evidence he'd collected, proof of corruption that could no longer be ignored. The time for hanging back was over. He'd been drawn into this battle by chance, but he would see it through by choice. Taking one last look at the sabotage pipe, Nathaniel thought of the leopard cub, now safely hidden somewhere in the canyon with its mother. His impulsive act of kindness had saved more than just one animal's life. It had exposed a truth that demanded action. He walked back to his truck, mind already planning their next move. The simple mechanic who'd tried to avoid attention had found something worth fighting for. And fight he would. Nathaniel spread the tools and supplies across his workbench, mind racing with possibilities. Years of fixing machines had taught him to see solutions where others saw only problems. Now, those skills would serve a different purpose. "What are you thinking?" Celeste asked, leaning against his truck. The morning sun caught the determination in her eyes. "We need proof that can't be disputed," Nathaniel said, picking up a motion sensor from his collection. "And we need to protect the areas they haven't sabotaged yet." He worked steadily, modifying trail cameras with weatherproof casings and extended battery life. Each unit could record for weeks without maintenance. More importantly, they were small, enough to hide in the canyon's natural features. "These will catch them in the act," he explained, showing Celeste how to position the cameras. "But we need more than just footage." Over the next few days, Nathaniel created a network of simple but effective monitoring devices. Pressure sensors near water sources would alert them to tampering. Modified pH meters could detect chemical contamination instantly. Every piece was designed to be reliable and hidden. Celeste watched him work, offering suggestions from her scientific background. Their different expertise blended naturally, creating solutions neither could have devised alone. Sometimes their hands would brush as they installed equipment, sending unexpected warmth through Nathaniel's chest. "You're amazing at this," Celeste said one evening as they reviewed their setup. "Most people wouldn't even know where to start." Nathaniel felt his face flush at the compliment. "Just applying what I know differently," he said softly. But her words meant more than he could express. Their first break came 3 days later. One of Nathaniel's sensors detected movement at a water source after midnight. The camera footage showed 2 of Hafford's men attempting to contaminate the pool. Thanks to Nathaniel's warning system, Celeste had water samples from before and after. Perfect evidence of deliberate poisoning. "This is exactly what we needed," Celeste said, examining the footage. Her hand found Nathaniel's arm, squeezing gently. "You did it." More evidence accumulated quickly. Nathaniel's devices caught multiple instances of sabotage. Each one was carefully documented, building an undeniable pattern of destruction. Celeste's scientific analysis provided the context that made the evidence impossible to dismiss. They presented their findings to local environmental officials and law enforcement. The meeting room was tense as they laid out their case. Footage, water samples, soil tests, and documented patterns of wildlife displacement. "This is comprehensive," the senior environmental officer said, reviewing their evidence. "More than anything we've seen before about Hafford's activities." Nathaniel felt Celeste's hand slip into his under the table. Her touch steadied him as they answered questions and explained their documentation. This was the moment that would make their efforts matter. The officials' response exceeded their hopes. An immediate investigation was launched. Hafford's construction permits were suspended pending review. For the first time, the developer's actions would face real scrutiny. Later that evening, Nathaniel and Celeste sat in his truck, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls. The reality of their success was still sinking in. "I never thought I'd be part of something like this," Nathaniel admitted, "making a real difference." Celeste turned to face him, her expression soft in the fading light. You've always had this in you, Nathaniel. You just needed the right cause to bring it out. Their eyes met, and Nathaniel felt the shift in the air between them. The partnership they built had grown into something deeper, something neither had expected but both welcomed. What happens now? He asked, both about their fight and this growing connection between them. Now, Celeste said, her smile warming him more than the setting sun, we keep protecting what matters. Looking out at the canyon they'd worked so hard to defend, Nathaniel realized how much had changed. His skills, once used just to get by, had become tools for real change. His solitary life had opened to include purpose, partnership, and possibly love. The investigation into Hafford was just beginning, but Nathaniel knew they'd passed a crucial point. They had proof, they had support, and most importantly, they had each other. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel felt truly significant. Not despite his humble skills, but because of how he'd chosen to use them. The triumph didn't last long. 3 days after their presentation to officials, Nathaniel noticed the first signs that something was wrong. His calls to the environmental office went unanswered. The police department suddenly claimed the evidence was inconclusive. This isn't right, Celeste said, pacing in Nathaniel's small living room. They were convinced yesterday. Something's changed. Nathaniel watched the news with growing dread. A small item mentioned that Preston Hafford had made a generous donation to the county's development fund. The next day, their primary contact at the environmental office was reassigned. He's buying them off, Nathaniel realized, his stomach turning. All of them. They tried to fight back, reaching out to state-level officials and environmental groups. But Hafford's influence ran deeper than they'd imagined. Doors that had been open slammed shut. Their evidence was labeled insufficient or simply disappeared. From official records dated one evening, driving home from another failed attempt to meet with officials, Nathaniel noticed headlights following him. Before he could react, a truck rammed him from behind. He swerved, barely keeping control, as 2 more vehicles boxed him in. They forced him off the road into an isolated area. 5 men emerged from the vehicles. Nathaniel recognized them as Hafford's security team. He reached for his phone, but they were on him before he could call for help. The beating was methodical, professional. They knew exactly how to cause maximum pain without leaving obvious evidence. Nathaniel tried to fight back, but he was outnumbered and overwhelmed. Through the haze of pain, he heard one of them speak. "Boss says to remind you what happens to people who don't mind their own business." They left him crumpled on the ground. Every breath a stabbing agony. It took him an hour to crawl back to his truck. His ribs screamed with each movement. His face was swollen, and he tasted blood. Somehow, he managed to drive himself to the emergency room. The doctors treated his injuries without asking too many questions. 3 cracked ribs, a mild concussion, countless bruises. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what came next. His phone rang as he was leaving the hospital. It was Celeste's number, but a man's voice spoke. "Listen carefully," the voice said. "Dr. Warner is with us. She's safe for now. But that depends on you." Nathaniel's world spun. "If you hurt, that's up to you. Walk away. Leave town. Forget everything you think you know. Do that, and she goes free. Make trouble, and..." The voice let the threat hang unfinished. "Let me talk to her," Nathaniel demanded. There was a shuffle, then Celeste's voice, tight with fear. "Nathaniel, don't." Her words cut off abruptly. 24 hours. The man's voice returned. "Then we decide her fate." The line went dead. Nathaniel sat in his truck, pain forgotten in the wave of despair that washed over him. Everything they'd worked for was crumbling. Celeste was in danger because he'd convinced her to fight. He drove home in a daze. His small apartment felt empty, accusing. The wall where they'd mapped out Halford's activities mocked him. What had? He'd been thinking he was just a mechanic, a nobody. He'd reached too high, and now Celeste was paying the price. Nathaniel packed a bag. Running was the smart choice. It would save Celeste, and he could disappear into another anonymous life somewhere else. He'd been foolish to think he could change anything. People like him didn't win against people like Halford. But as he zipped the bag, a sound echoed in his memory, the desperate cry of the leopard mother, pleading for her trapped cub. He remembered her fierce devotion, her refusal to abandon, her young despite the danger. He remembered Celeste's passion for protecting the helpless, her belief in doing what was right regardless of the odds. The bag slipped from his trembling hands. Running would save Celeste, but it would destroy everything she fought for, everything they had built together. It would prove that people like Halford could always win through brutality and corruption. Nathaniel sank to the floor, his injuries throbbing with each breath. The leopard mother hadn't given up. She'd stayed, facing a dangerous stranger, because protecting her family mattered more than fear. Now Celeste needed the same courage from him, but courage alone wouldn't be enough. Halford had money, power, and ruthless determination. Nathaniel had, what? His battered body protested even standing up. His evidence was worthless, his allies gone or bought off. He had no resources, no backup, no real plan. The weight of hopelessness pressed down on him. He was alone, injured, and out of options. Celeste's life hung in the balance, and for the first time since finding that trapped cub, Nathaniel truly doubted he had the strength to do what needed to be done. Nathaniel forced himself to stand, ignoring the pain that shot through his ribs. He limped to his workbench, where his tools lay scattered. These simple implements had helped him save a leopard cub. Maybe they could help him save Celeste too. He knew where they would hold her. Halford's dam construction site was the only place. Secure enough, far from prying eyes. The massive machinery and half-built structures would provide plenty of cover. More importantly, it was where Halford felt most powerful. Gathering his tools with methodical precision, Nathaniel formed a plan. He'd spent years fixing heavy machinery. He knew their weaknesses, their critical points. Each bolt, each hydraulic line, each electrical system could be turned against itself. The drive to the construction site took 40 minutes. Dawn was breaking, painting the canyon walls in shades of purple and gold. Nathaniel parked his truck behind a ridge, out of sight. Security patrols circled the perimeter, but their patterns were predictable. He waited for the gap between rounds, moving slowly to minimize the pain in his ribs. Nathaniel crept through the shadows of towering cranes and bulldozers. Each machine he passed, he sabotaged with quick, precise movements. Hydraulic lines loosened, electrical systems rewired, control panels reprogrammed. The machines became silent allies in his rescue attempt. He spotted Celeste through a trailer window. 2 guards stood outside. She was tied to a chair, but her expression remained defiant. Nathaniel's heart clenched at the sight of bruises on her face. His fingers tightened around his wrench until his knuckles turned white. A familiar voice drew his attention. Preston Halford had arrived, stepping out of a luxury SUV like he owned the world. In his expensive suit and polished shoes, he looked absurdly out of place among the construction equipment. "Start the equipment," Halford barked at his workers. "We're pushing ahead with demolition today. By sunset, I want this canyon ready for flooding." The first machine sputtered to life, then died with a grinding screech. Others followed, each failing spectacularly. Alarms blared as systems overloaded. A crane's arm swung wildly, its controls unresponsive. Chaos erupted as workers scrambled. Away from malfunctioning equipment. Nathaniel used the confusion to move. He triggered the emergency release on a water retention tank, sending thousands of gallons cascading through the site. The flood caught the guards off balance, sweeping them away from the trailer. He sprinted through the rising water, his body screaming in protest. The trailer door gave way under his shoulder. Celeste's eyes widened as he burst in. "You shouldn't have come," she said as he cut her free. "They'll kill you." "They'll have to catch me first," Nathaniel replied. Helping her up, a roar echoed through the canyon. Not machinery, but something wild and familiar. The leopard mother stood on a ridge above the site, her cub beside her. Whether by coincidence or some deeper connection, they had come to witness the destruction of their home. Hafford's voice rang out behind them. "Shoot them! Shoot them all!" Gunfire erupted, but the sabotage machines had created a protective chaos. Water continued to rise as more tanks burst. Support structures groaned ominously as their compromised foundations shifted. Nathaniel grabbed Celeste's hand. "Run!" They splashed through the flood, dodging between failing equipment. Behind them, Hafford screamed in rage as his empire literally crumbled. The leopards disappeared into the canyon shadows, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. A massive crack echoed through the site. The main dam support, weakened by Nathaniel's sabotage, began to give way. Workers fled in panic as concrete. Barriers toppled like dominoes. Hafford's dream of controlling the canyon's water was dissolving in spectacular fashion. Water coursed through the construction site, turning the ground into mud and washing away years of Hafford's careful planning. Through the chaos, Nathaniel held on to Celeste's hand as they made their way to higher ground. Behind them, the sound of crashing metal and panicked shouts filled the air. Hafford stood in the middle of it all, his expensive suit soaked and muddy, watching helplessly as his empire crumbled. His men scattered, more concerned with saving themselves than following orders. The first rays of dawn painted the scene in harsh light, revealing the full extent of the destruction. "This is impossible," Hafford screamed, his composure finally breaking. "Do you know what you've done?" "Exactly what needed to be done," Celeste answered, her voice steady and clear above the noise. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone must have called them when the chaos began. This time, Nathaniel knew there would be no bribes or cover-ups. The evidence was too overwhelming, too public. The first police cars arrived as the sun cleared the canyon rim. Officers jumped out, taking in the scene with wide eyes. Behind them came news vans, their reporters already filming the destruction. Hafford's crimes would be impossible to hide now. "Over here," Celeste called out, waving to a group of environmental officials. She recognized. "We have proof of everything. The sabotage, the endangered species violations, the attempted murder." The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and documentation. Nathaniel walked investigators through the site, showing them the deliberate damage to water systems, the poisoned pools, the tampered equipment. His mechanical knowledge proved invaluable as he explained how Hafford had orchestrated it all. "We've been trying to catch him for years," one official admitted, shaking his head in amazement. "We never had anyone who could piece it all together like this." Celeste worked alongside him, providing the scientific context that made the case airtight. Together, they painted a complete picture of Hafford's schemes. The developer's face grew paler with each new revelation, his arrogance replaced by the realization that he had finally been outmaneuvered dark by afternoon. The news had spread throughout the state. Hafford's other projects came under scrutiny as more whistleblowers came forward, encouraged by Nathaniel's example. The man's carefully constructed world of influence began to collapse like a house of cards. "I never thought I'd see this day," Celeste said softly, standing with Nathaniel at the canyon's edge. The construction site below was now cordoned off as a crime scene. So many people tried to stop him, but it took someone who could see the small details, someone who understood how things really work. work. Nathaniel felt the weight of her words. All his life, he'd been overlooked, his practical skills dismissed as simple labor. But those same skills had allowed him to see what others missed, to understand the mechanical truth behind Halford's lies. Movement caught his eye. The leopard mother and their cub appeared on a rocky outcrop across the canyon. The same animals he'd risked his life to save now stood as living proof of what was worth fighting for. The mother's eyes met his for a long moment, a connection between two protectors who had refused to give up. Celeste's hand found his, and he felt the familiar spark between them, stronger now after everything they'd faced together. Their relationship had grown from reluctant allies to something deeper, forged in shared danger and common purpose. "What will you do now?" she asked, turning to face him. "Stay," he answered simply. "There's work to be done here. Real work, protecting what matters." She smiled, understanding the transformation in him. He was no longer the drifter who fixed machines and avoided trouble. He had found his place, his purpose, and someone to share it with. The leopards began to move away, blending into the wilderness that was now safe from destruction. Nathaniel watched them go, feeling a profound sense of completion. They were survivors, adapting and enduring against all odds. Just like him. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.